Mirasee.
Even like some of the other launches that we've run, like the side launches or launches that we've done with partners or whatever, even those have felt more like we got to get this right because of the disappointment in May. So it definitely carries over.
I'm Cynthia Lamb, and you're listening to Behind the Launch, the show that pulls back the curtain on the ups and downs of launching a product or a service. So far in this series, we've explored the excitement of the $1 million launch of Launch My Courses in May of 2020, followed by the disappointing results of the launch of the same program in May of 2021. Since then, we've regrouped, debriefed, and begun to look forward to the next launch with optimism and hope. For the purpose of this series, I'm conflating the launches that Mirasee ran in September of 2021 and February of 2022, where assumptions and hypotheses are being tested. In this episode, those launches are about to begin. Understandably, everyone is feeling the pressure. But what is it about launches that make them so difficult and anxiety-producing? Here's Daniele, CEO of Mirasee.
Having been doing this for more than a decade now and having had many great successes and also, a fair number of great challenges, there are two things that tend to make it a lot harder than it needs to be when you're thinking about expectations and will it turn out this way or that way, what's going to happen, etc. And one is putting way more of your self-worth into the results of a particular activity than is appropriate, right? My self-worth has nothing to do, very little, if nothing to do with how well we do or don't do in this launch. I could wake up feeling terrible and I deliver a crappy webinar and people don't have a great experience, and none of that makes me a bad person, right? It would be unfortunate. I don't want that to happen. But, my self-worth is not bound up in how I perform on a given day. And I don't know that I always felt that way, but I know that the more that is my perspective, the happier I tend to be, which counterintuitively tends to make me do a better job at the things I'm actually working on. The second piece is the fear of the unknown.
Mary Williams, then Director of Education, agrees.
People want to know what's going to happen before it happens, which is hard to do in a lot of ways because, at least from a coaching standpoint, I've seen so many people go through such huge transformations, both personally and professionally, by launching. So sometimes you can tell them, yeah, it will look like this, but then there's always this big unknown piece for every single person.
What if this launch tanks? What if it's a disaster? What if we're hundreds of thousands of dollars lower than we thought we would be? What am I going to do? What's going to happen? And the answer is that if that were to happen, I would probably have to make some very tough decisions. Which projects do we continue or not continue? What are we going to do to make up the revenue? Do we have to let people go? These are hard things to contemplate. But the reality is that if push comes to shove and that's the position I'm in, I'll figure it out. I'll handle it, right? 5 years from now, I'm not going to look back on this was the moment when life as I knew it ended, right? So challenging as it may be, I'll face it and I'll get through it. And this won't be the last challenge or the last success that I'll experience. And so inflating it in my mind in advance, creating all this load on it that may not be warranted. And, if the worst case scenario comes to pass, worrying about it in advance won't help me deal with it when it does. Again, it adds a lot of this unnecessary energetic load that is just going to make it harder for me to deal with things and make me worse at my job.
Although these test launches are smaller, they're very important. If they fail, we could be back at square one, trying to figure out what changes to make to the offer coming up in May of 2022. Plus, Mirasee needs revenue to support its initiatives. I asked Danny, what would constitute success for these smaller launches?
Do you have that figure in your mind right now?
Honestly, I don't. I feel like the structure and arc of this launch is just a little bit different. And so I can't say, when we were in a similar structure in the past, and I've seen this before, at this point, we were at this number and I can extrapolate out. I don't feel like I have that confidence this time.
Does that bother you at all? Not feeling at this moment that confidence?
I think it bothers Boomy a lot more than it bothers me. I've kind of come to live with it.
We'll come back to Boomy in a minute, but first I wanted to check in with Joey Gorgie. As Director of Operations, she was in charge of the myriad of details and logistics at play in a Mirasee launch.
As a project manager, I would love to say that we're ready to go, and if you opted in now, that you would get the launch as planned, but pretty much nothing is final. As always, I wish we were further ahead than we are. We're pretty much 80% there on everything, which is how it often goes. It's you haven't quite finalized everything, but you're getting close, but on so many things that there's still a lot to do. I'm not afraid of what's left to do. I think we're pretty close. I feel really good about the content we're putting out. But I mean, if you asked me this question the day before the launch kicks off, I'd probably be in a pretty different headspace.
Despite her incredible competence, Joey is no stranger to doubts and fears.
I've used to very regular feel I just can't do this anymore. I can't take it. This isn't worth it. The voices in my head would be very negative. It'd be much more of a victim mindset. It's exasperation, And it's been a long time since I felt that way. I definitely still feel regularly that I'm doing things that are challenging and that I have deadlines that are pressing and, it's all the same situation. The environment is pretty much exactly the same, but a big part of being able to navigate that is just sort of keeping optimistic and priorities aligned and continuing to lead the different pieces in play, the team members and the initiatives and all these things. So I definitely feel better equipped now than I did a year ago to take on what we're doing.
At Mirasee, that's what we hope for, to do our jobs better so that we can serve our clients better and grow in our ability to tolerate the more difficult aspects of our roles. Here's Bhumi Pathak, COO of Mirasee.
I've realized that the best thing that I can do in order to influence the success or the outcome of the launch is to really support Joey and Danny and to do their best and show up as their best. So before, I used to get freaked out about launch results and how things are going. And then, I am a problem solver. So I would like to say, okay, let's look at the data. What's going on? Have you looked at this? Have you tried that? And, while some of these ideas may have had merit, a lot of times they were not super helpful to the launch team or to Danny because they were already trying to figure these things out and they had way more intimate knowledge of what was going on in the launch. So the best thing I could do is essentially trust them that they are on it, they're figuring things out. If a launch is not going well and I'm feeling anxious, chances are, Danny and Joe and the launch team are feeling 3 times as anxious as I am. So the best thing I can do is create sort of that space for them where they can think better and they can, do what they need to do and show better. So something that I did this launch was, created a plan. I talked to Danny. It's hey, what would be the most helpful during the launch? And we created a plan in terms of what I could be doing in order to support him. And we called it, being Danny's wing woman plan for the launch. And so shifting my focus to other people who are involved and how I can help them also really help me deal with my anxiety as well.
That's another powerful insight I'm taking away. Helping other members of the launch team can ease your own anxiety. What else can you do to ease anxiety? Here's Bhumi again.
People talk about stress hormones, but there's also the anti-stress hormone called oxytocin. And so oxytocin is all about emotional and feeling bonded, and it's associated with love. I don't exactly know the science behind it, but rather than going towards adrenaline or responding with adrenaline, responding with oxytocin seems to help. The form that takes is spending a lot of time with my kids when I can, because that just naturally fills me up with oxytocin. And, a lot of cuddling with the kids or pets, I suppose that could work too. And also connection, connecting with team members, connecting with friends and family, and having deep conversations. I feel also kind of generates the same feeling, which counters anxiety for me.
Joey would agree.
When the whole team is working really hard and the whole team is doing it together and the whole team feels a sense of accomplishment, that can be fun. But when you feel like you're the only one and everything's on you and you're isolated and it's not fair and no one else understands, that's where you really end up miserable, And it can be the same workload. It can be the same number of hours. It could even be the same work. It's just a matter of feeling supported and feeling appreciated and all those types of things.
Another concept we stress at Mirasee is self-care. That's not just lip service, as Joey demonstrates.
You sound tired.
Thanks, Cynthia. Honestly, in this moment, I'm tired because you caught me
kind of moving from one thing to another thing to another thing. Yeah, maybe I'm a little tired. It's tiring. The day-to-day is tiring. I have been like insanely mindful of my energy and my sleeping and my eating and my morning routines, like all of these things, because my last launch experience was so terrible. I was like, there's no way I can let that happen again. Like, I won't last another year at Mirasee if that's what happens again. So I've been super disciplined to not let it feel the same. And it doesn't feel the same, but it's not a walk in the park for sure.
Joey's referring to that disappointing May 2021 launch when our developer got COVID and she was working around the clock.
I remember that it took me like until Christmas of this year, like last Christmas, I went on vacation. Like I went to Europe and I really took a break and I disconnected from work for 3 weeks. And I really felt like it took up until then for me to be energized at work again. And I was like, I can't go like 9 months not enjoying work again. Like it's too long to not be happy. So that was my goal this time, is like be really disciplined as it's happening. So I'm not digging myself into a hole that's going to take me 9 months to dig myself back out of. Like, let's dig a little baby hole that we could pop right back out of in a day or two. Like, let's take a nice weekend off and then get back to normal. That's been the goal this time.
In addition to classic self-care, Joey also experimented with self-suggestion rather than engaging in negative self-talk like she did in the past.
This time it's been more like, you're executing well, you're doing the best you can, there's no one that could do this better than you. Like, it's just been like, I've been really trying to brainwash myself, and it's been working.
It's probably pretty clear that launches are stressful, and if you want to continue to do launches, you have to find the tools that help you manage that stress. Whether that's time with your kids or pets, connecting with others, helping your team, engaging in healthy self-talk, and/or planning a vacation for after the launch. Maybe at the end of the day, the best medicine for the anxiety that comes with a launch is to keep bringing your focus back to the people you want to serve and why you want to serve them. If you can keep breathing into that, you'll be light years farther along than you were before. I'm Cynthia Lamb, and you've been listening to Behind the Launch. Behind the Launch is part of the Mirasee FM podcast network, which also includes such shows as Course Lab and Blowing Up. I wrote and produced this episode. Geoff Govertsen was my right hand, creating order and clips out of the 19 interviews. Daniele is our executive producer. To make sure you don't miss great episodes coming up on Behind the Launch, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. And if you like the show, please give us a starred review. It is the best way to help us get these ideas out there to more people. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on Behind the Launch.